In the dusty frontier town of Arbor's Edge, schoolteacher Clara Whitfield leads a quiet life dedicated to her students until the night a wounded stranger knocks on her door. Rumors swirl about a man who blasted through a rowdy saloon full of outlaws. Some folks claim he rides under a deadly alias. Others swear he's a righteous vigilante. But when Clara offers him shelter, bandaging his bullet wounds and hiding him from prowling deputies, she has no idea she's harboring the most wanted gunslinger in the entire county. Tensions ignite, secrets unravel, and the line between good and evil blurs in a single gun-smoke-laced instant. A late summer breeze rattled the shutters of Clara Whitfield's small cottage on the outskirts of Arbor's Edge. By the warm glow of a kerosene lamp, Clara carefully stacked school books on her table. As the schoolteacher for the one-room schoolhouse in town, she stayed up most nights preparing lessons. Arithmetic charts and grammar primers were her fortress against the creeping loneliness of frontier life. She was just about to snuff out the lamp and head to bed when an urgent knock shattered the stillness. Clara froze, heart hammering. In Arbor's Edge, folks did not come knocking past midnight unless it was a dire emergency or something far darker. Approaching the door with caution, Clara gripped the brass handle. Through the thin wooden plank, she heard ragged breathing. When she cracked the door, a tall figure staggered forward. He wore a dusty duster coat, and in the faint light, she noticed dark patches staining his sleeve and side. Blood. "Please," he rasped. I need help." She nearly slammed the door in fear, but the desperation in his eyes, hollow and rimmed with pain, stopped her. She found herself stepping back, allowing him inside. The stranger collapsed to one knee, stifling a moan. Clara quickly shut and bolted the door, praying her instinct to help was not a fatal mistake. She guided him to the small sofa near the fireplace, where he sank into the cushions, breathing heavily. "Stay still," Clara said softly, forcing calm into her voice. She lit another lamp to get a better look. Beneath the coat, his shirt was torn by a bullet graze near his ribs, oozing bright red. A second wound on his upper arm, also from a bullet, looked dangerously close to the bone. "Are you a doctor?" the stranger asked between gritted teeth. "No, but I've done my share of patching up." "I'm the teacher." He let out a faint chuckle that sounded more like a cough. "Teacher," he echoed. "I guess that'll have to do." Clara fetched water from the kitchen and rummaged her meager supplies, clean rags, a spool of thread, a needle, and the only antiseptic. She had a bottle of whiskey left over from a Christmas gift. The night was hot sweat beading on her brow as she cleaned and sutured the wounds with as steady a hand as she could manage. "Thank you," he murmured when she was done, eyelashes fluttering as exhaustion overtook him. "Name's Silas," he added, wincing as he shifted. Then he fell silent, consciousness slipping away. She watched him a moment, the lamplight illuminating his sharp features, the faint stubble and a scar near his jawline. Something about him made her uneasy. On the frontier, men like him drifted from place to place, sometimes on the right side of the law, sometimes not. But injured as he was, he needed help, and her conscience wouldn't let her turn him away. Sighing, Clara draped a blanket over Silas and gently dimmed the lamp. "Let's hope you're not trouble," she whispered, locking the door once more. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters again, as though reminding her that no good deed on the frontier ever went unpunished. By the time the eastern horizon began to lighten with the first rays of dawn, Clara's guest was still asleep. She checked Silas's wounds, relieved to find that the bleeding had stopped. He looked feverish but stable enough to leave alone for a few hours. She had a school to run. Clara dressed hurriedly in a simple blouse and skirt, pinned her hair and packed her lunch. She glanced at Silas, who mumbled something in his sleep, then stepped outside into the crisp morning air. It was early, but she guessed townsfolk would be about bakers, farmers, and the stable hand preparing for the day. Arbor's Edge was a modest settlement in eastern Kansas, about 3 days' ride from Dodge City. The war had ended almost 2 decades before, but scars remained, and tensions still flared whenever a stranger arrived. She had chosen this place precisely for its tranquility. She'd seen enough horrors in her youth. Now it seemed trouble had come knocking at her very door. At the schoolhouse, Clara found the children arriving in various states of excitement. Little Lucy Price babbled about a rowdy commotion near the saloon the night before. Caleb Jenkins, tall for his 13 years, swung the door wide and exclaimed that the sheriff had ridden out early this morning. The "Ooh, sheriff," why, Clara asked, feigning casual curiosity as she ushered them to their desks. Caleb shrugged. "Hunting some dangerous man. My pa said the man shot up old Big Mike's saloon, put down 3 men in a matter of seconds or so, they say. They say he might be a hired gun from Texas." Clara's heart tightened. "Is that so?" she managed. "Sure is," said Sarah, a girl with pigtails. "Ma said the fella had lightning in his hands. Pistols was a blur." She imitated the quick draw, with an imaginary gun spinning her finger. "They say he's real dangerous." The children, excited by the spectacle, hardly noticed Clara's pensive expression. She began the day's lesson, all the while fighting the knot in her stomach. She recalled Silas's half-conscious state, his gun belt still around his waist, though she had unbuckled it to reach his wound. Hadn't she noticed 2 revolvers? Or was it just one? She'd been too focused on the blood. By recess, the children spilled out onto the dusty yard. Clara stayed inside, rummaging for chalk and trying to calm her nerves. Sheriff Grayson Stone was not a man to be trifled with. He had a reputation for having no mercy for criminals, especially ones rumored to kill at the drop of a hat. She forced her mind to focus on reading lessons and arithmetic. But in the corner of her vision, she kept seeing that wounded man on her sofa, pale, battered, and possibly the exact outlaw the sheriff was hunting, if word got out that she was harboring him. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped outside to keep an eye on her students. The midday sun was bright, scorching the dusty ground. She spotted Hank Clemens, a local rancher, trotting by on his horse. He tipped his hat at her. "Mornin', Miss Whitfield. You hear about the trouble in town last night?" "I heard something about it," she replied carefully. "Any news?" Hank frowned. "Nothing certain, but folks are jumpy. We heard the fella who did the shooting might be the same man wanted by the Pinkerton Detective Agency a few towns over." He shook his head. "You watch yourself, Miss Whitfield." Clara forced a polite smile. "Always do, Mr. Clemens." She remained outside until the children finished their recess. Even as she watched them skipping and playing tag, all she could think about was the battered gunslinger asleep in her cottage and the fact that the sheriff was out looking for him right now. After the final bell rang, Clara dismissed her pupils and was tidying up when she noticed Deputy Amos Fletcher standing in the doorframe. He was a young man, with wide shoulders and a shock of red hair, his badge glinting in the afternoon light. "Mighty fine day," Deputy Fletcher said, crossing his arms. Clara nodded. "Sure is, Deputy. Can I help you?" He offered a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just doing a round of questions, Miss Whitfield. You've heard about the trouble from last night, I reckon. She felt a slight tremor in her hands. I have, but I didn't see anything, if that's what you're asking. Figured as much. But we're asking everyone in town. That fella caused quite the ruckus. Sheriff wants us thorough. She busied herself arranging chalk. Well, if I see anything suspicious, I'll let you know. He doffed his hat and smiled, though there was wariness in his gaze. Much obliged, ma'am. The moment the deputy left, Clara breathed again. She checked the time and rushed back home. The mid-afternoon sun cast the cottage's shadow across the yard. She entered to find Silas awake on the sofa, attempting to stand. Not so fast. Clara dropped her satchel on a chair and hurried over. The color had returned to his face, but his expression was twisted in pain. You'll tear your stitches. I need to move on, he said, his voice still gravelly but steadier than last night. Thank you for patching me up. He grimaced as Clara pressed him back down gently. If you walk out there now, you'll be an easy target. And by the sound of it, the sheriff is out looking for the man who caused trouble at Big Mike's saloon. Silas didn't deny it. Instead, he asked, Does the sheriff know? She folded her arms. Not from me, she said. But the deputy came by the schoolhouse. They're asking questions all over town. He drew in a slow breath, wincing at the pain. I'll try to be out of your hair by nightfall. Despite her better judgment, Clara found herself saying, You're in no condition to ride. I can see that plainly. If you try, you'll collapse, and the next bullet you get might be the one that kills you. His dark eyes lifted to hers. Why would you help me? She thought back to the time she'd nearly bled out herself in another life during the final throes of the Civil War, nursed by a stranger. Because it's the right thing to do, she answered simply. But I have a right to know. Are you really the man who shot those people last night? Silas exhaled, closing his eyes. They left me no choice, ma'am. I'm not proud of what happened, but it was them or me. Clara studied him. Something about his regretful tone felt genuine. Still, the sheriff and half the town would see it differently. You can stay here until you heal, she said at last. But you need to keep a low profile. Deputies might come around. His guarded expression softened with relief. I promise I won't bring trouble to your doorstep, if I can help it. Her heart thudded as she wondered if it was already there. But she nodded. All right. That evening, Clara locked the doors and shutters. By the dim glow of the lamp, she ladled a simple stew into 2 bowls, offering one to Silas. They ate in silence, aware that every moment they spent under the same roof raised the risk of discovery, and for Clara, the risk of complicity in harboring a wanted man. The next morning, Clara woke early to the sound of a soft groan. She found Silas awake, beads of sweat on his brow. His wounds still looked angry and inflamed. She fetched fresh water and carefully cleaned the stitches. He tensed in pain, but made no complaints. I have to go to the schoolhouse again, Clara said quietly, rinsing a bloodied rag. But I'll be back around midday to check on you. Silas nodded, grateful. You've done more than I could have hoped for. Before leaving, Clara insisted he remain hidden indoors. Keep away from the windows. If anyone knocks, don't answer. At school, Clara found that whispers about the saloon shootout had only grown wilder. Rumors circulated that the mysterious gunslinger was a hired killer from Abilene, or that he had once ridden with Jesse James. Others insisted he was a Pinkerton agent turned renegade. The children absorbed these tales with wide-eyed fascination, weaving them into more outlandish stories of their own. Noon came, and Clara rushed back to her cottage. Approaching the front door, she noticed a subtle scuff mark near the threshold, a sign that someone might have stood there recently. Her heart pounded. She opened the door cautiously. Inside, she found Silas leaning against the wall, revolver in hand, tension radiating from him. When he saw her, he quickly holstered the gun. "Deputy Fletcher was here," Silas said, his voice taut. "Knocked on the door, but I didn't make a sound." He walked around the side window, but I stayed out of sight. Clara's pulse thrummed with fear. She set down her satchel. "I have no idea why he's pressing so hard," she whispered. "Or maybe the sheriff suspects me, because I live alone. People might assume a single woman would be intimidated into hiding someone." Silas raked a hand through his hair. "I don't want to get you in trouble, Miss Whitfield." His genuine concern touched her in a way she hadn't expected. She sighed, moving closer. "You haven't told me the whole story, have you? Because I'm risking a lot, and I want to know who exactly I'm helping." He winced, whether from pain or reluctance. "All right, I'll tell you enough so you know I'm not a monster." They sat at the small table, the midday sun filtering through drawn curtains. Silas pressed a hand to his bandaged side and began. "I was drifting through these parts looking for work. I ran into the men in Big Mike's saloon. They recognized me from an incident in Ellsworth. They claimed I killed a man in cold blood, someone named Carl Jenkins. But Carl had ambushed me first. It was self-defense. The sheriff there wouldn't believe my side of it. So I fled. Since then, any group of vigilantes or bounty hunters tries to drag me in for a reward. They cornered me last night. Shots were fired. It all happened too fast." Clara listened, unsettled by the mention of Jenkins. It was a common name, and she prayed it had no connection to her student Caleb Jenkins. Probably just a coincidence. "You're saying you're innocent?" Silas's jaw tightened. "I'm no saint, Miss Whitfield. I've drawn my gun, but it's never been in cold blood." He looked down. "Anyway, I'm sorry you're caught up in this. I intend to move on as soon as I can." Clara studied him, unsure whether to believe every word. But the regret in his eyes seemed real. She gave a slight nod. "Let's hope you heal quickly, Silas, because the sheriff is turning this town upside down to find you." A few days passed, and Clara maintained her routine carefully. Each morning, she left Silas enough food and water before going to the schoolhouse. Each afternoon, she returned home and discreetly checked on him. He was healing, though slowly, and his fever had subsided. He insisted on doing small tasks to repay her kindness, like sweeping the floor or chopping firewood in the early dawn, before anyone was stirring. Clara scolded him, worried about his wounds, but inside she felt relief that he was trying not to be a burden. Word around town was that Sheriff Grayson Stone was growing more agitated by the day. It didn't help that Big Mike, whose saloon had been shot up, was pressing charges and offering a reward for the Gunslinger's capture. Tension weighed on everyone's mind. One afternoon, as Clara was grading her students' spelling tests, she felt a presence by the door. Looking up, she found the towering figure of Sheriff Stone himself. He was a middle-aged man, broad-shouldered, and wore a permanent scowl. The children sat up straight at the sight of him, sensing trouble. "Afternoon, Miss Whitfield," he said, his voice carrying a gravelly authority. Might we talk in private? Clara's heart fluttered, but she mustered calm. "Children, continue reading the chapter I assigned." She led the sheriff outside, where the dust kicked up around their feet. "I'm investigating the whereabouts of a wanted man." Sheriff Stone began hooking his thumbs behind his gun belt. We believe he's still in the area, perhaps in the care of someone who's sympathetic or intimidated. Clara offered a neutral smile. I've heard the rumors, Sheriff, but I'm afraid I can't help you. He narrowed his eyes. I hear you live alone just outside town. Lonely place, easy for a stranger to hide. Clara clutched her shawl. Are you accusing me of harboring him? Not yet. But I'd hate for your reputation to be tarnished if you were found aiding a criminal. The folks of Arbor's Edge trust you with their children. Imagine if you lost that trust. A cold swirl of dread coiled in Clara's stomach. She kept her composure. I assure you, Sheriff, I haven't seen him. But if someone knocks on my door begging for help and they're bleeding, I'd do my best to help anyone. He tilted his head, studying her. The law's the law, Miss Whitfield. You'd do well to remember that. Clara forced her face to remain impassive, though inside she was trembling. Of course. If I learn anything, I'll come straight to you. He nodded, seemingly satisfied for now. With a tip of his hat, he strode away, leaving behind a trail of intimidation in his wake. When she returned to the classroom, she found the children silent. They sensed trouble in the air, and Clara worked hard to restore the usual calm. But her mind churned with worry. The sheriff's threat was all too clear. She had no illusions if he discovered Silas at her cottage. She would lose her job, her standing, maybe even her freedom. Yet each time she considered turning Silas in, she recalled the quiet gratitude in his eyes, the gentleness in how he thanked her for a bowl of soup. She had to believe, for now, that she was doing the right thing. That evening, Clara returned home with a deeper sense of foreboding. She lit the lamp and found Silas at the table carefully loading bullets into a revolver with one hand while steadying himself against the table with the other. He looked up, relief washing over his face when he saw it was her. You're still here, she said quietly, setting down her books. Silas slipped the revolver into his belt, glancing away. I considered leaving, he admitted. But I'm not as healed as I hoped. Every time I try to swing up onto a horse, my side screams at me. She nodded. Sheriff Stone visited me at the schoolhouse today. His face hardened. He's on to you. I'm not sure. But he's suspicious. He all but threatened me. Said I'd lose everything if I was found helping you. Silas lowered himself into a chair, wincing. Miss Whitfield, I'm grateful for what you've done, but I can't let you ruin your life for me. First light, I'll ride out of here, even if it kills me. A surge of emotion rose in Clara. Fear for him. Anger at the sheriff's cruelty, and something else she couldn't quite name. She knelt by his side. You can't go yet. I've seen your wounds, Silas. They'll tear open if you push yourself. You'll bleed out on the road, or the deputies will track you down. He set a hand gently on her arm. I can't stay and watch you lose everything. I'm not worth that. She placed her hand over his, meeting his gaze. You let me be the judge of that. They stayed like that a moment, a silent understanding passing between them. Finally, Clara sat back, pulling in a trembling breath. But I need you to tell me something. The sheriff mentioned a bounty. Are you wanted for something else besides that incident in Ellsworth? Silas pursed his lips, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. I got into a confrontation in Dodge City some months back. A card game gone sour. The other man drew first, but I fired faster. He was the nephew of a rich rancher who put out a private bounty for me. Pinkerton detectives have my description. A heaviness settled in Clara's chest. This wasn't just a minor scuffle. So it's not just the sheriff. It could be bounty hunters or Pinkertons. Silas nodded. I won't lie to you. Trouble follows me. She swallowed hard, remembering how her father died in the chaos of Reconstruction, shot by someone who never faced justice. Life on the frontier was never black and white. She saw the weariness and guilt in Silas's eyes. You'll rest until you can ride. Then you'll go, she said, voice trembling. That's the plan, and until then I'll do what I can to keep you safe. But promise me you won't draw that gun unless there's no other choice. I can't abide more killing. Silas looked at the weapon holstered at his side, then back at her. I promise. They sat in silence, listening to the wind rustle the cottonwoods outside. Clara wondered how long their fragile alliance could hold before the law came crashing in, bringing with it the moral question of whether she was truly saving a good man or merely prolonging the inevitable for a dangerous fugitive. Days slipped by in a tense routine. Clara continued teaching her students, forcing herself to smile and remain composed even as her nerves were on edge. Each day, rumors intensified. Folks whispered that bounty hunters might arrive any moment, that vigilantes would form a posse and go door to door. Despite the tension, Clara noticed a change in Silas. His color improved, and he managed to stand straighter. He even teased her one evening when she accidentally burned the stew. I guess the kids learn the reading, writing, arithmetic, but not cooking, he said with a half smile. She gave him a mock glare, but a small laugh escaped her. It felt strangely normal, like a fleeting moment of camaraderie before the weight of their situation settled again. Yet the outside world loomed. One afternoon at the schoolhouse, a tall stranger appeared. He wore a dusty coat and had a hawk-like gaze. His accent was southern refined, yet with a hard edge. He introduced himself as Cooper Landry, a detective with the Pinkerton agency. The children gawked at his imposing figure. Miss Whitfield, he said, tipping his hat. I'm conducting an investigation into a dangerous fugitive. The Pinkerton agency has reason to believe he may be hiding in or around Arbor's Edge. I'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. Clara's heart pounded. Of course. My students are in the middle of class, but we can speak briefly. He followed her outside, scanning the horizon with hawk-like vigilance. We have a suspect, Silas Archer. We know he fled from Dodge City and likely passed through Ellsworth. We suspect he may be traveling under a different name. Have you encountered any strangers recently? Her mind whirled. She kept her face neutral. I don't get many visitors, Detective. I live alone and keep to myself. Landry's expression remained politely cold. I see. Well, if you see or hear anything, please contact me at the boarding house in town. The Pinkerton agency pays for information leading to his capture. Clara's mouth felt dry. She forced a swallow. I'll keep that in mind. Landry offered a tight smile, tipping his hat again. Have a pleasant day, ma'am. She watched him stroll back toward his horse, unsettled by the authoritative confidence he exuded. That evening she recounted the encounter to Silas, who went pale. Pinkerton's hell. They're relentless. His eyes flickered with fear. If Landry sniffs me out here, he'll drag you down too. They're not known for being gentle with folks who harbor fugitives. Clara's voice shook. We'll have to be extra careful. Silas sighed, raking a hand through his hair. I'm close to healed. Another day or two I can mount a horse without passing out. I'll slip away in the darkness, spare you any more risk. Despite everything, a pang of sadness tugged at Clara's heart. She pressed her lips together. Let's hope that's soon. The children need me, and I can't do any good for them if I end up in jail for hiding a fugitive." Neither voiced the other worry that Pinkerton Detective Landry might track Silas down before he ever got the chance to leave. And if the detective cornered Silas, there would be nowhere left to hide, and no bullets left to dodge. Late that night, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the window, the lamp turned low, and watched the moonlight play across the dusty yard. Her thoughts spun. She was harboring an outlaw, a man with a price on his head. Yet every time she considered turning him in, her conscience rebelled. She'd seen men condemned unfairly before, and she sensed in Silas a man trying to escape a violent past, not someone reveling in it. Outside, thunder rumbled. The night sky flickered with distant lightning. A summer storm was rolling in a fitting omen for the tension building in Arbor's Edge. Suddenly, the wooden planks of the porch creaked. Clara froze, heart leaping to her throat. She snuffed the lamp, creeping to the window. In the moonlight, she saw a figure stealthily approaching the cottage door. Another flash of lightning revealed two more shapes lurking near the side window, shadows armed with rifles. Panicking Clara rushed to Silas's makeshift cot. "Someone's outside," she hissed, shaking him awake. Still groggy, Silas grabbed his revolver, cursing under his breath. "Get back!" he ordered, painfully pushing himself to his feet. A loud knock rattled the door. "Open up," a deep voice shouted. "We know you're in there." "Archer." Clara's blood ran cold. If they knew his name, this had to be the Pinkertons or bounty hunters. Silas pressed his back to the wall, gun raised. "They might have the cottage surrounded," he whispered. "We can't fight them all," Clara frantically thought. "The root cellar outside around the back. There's a storm door. Can we slip out unseen?" A second thunderous knock shook the door. "Last warning. Open up. We're authorized by Pinkerton Agency to apprehend Silas Archer dead or alive." Time was running out. She directed Silas to the back window, helping him climb out into the darkness while lightning flashed. Rain began to fall in sheets, creating a torrent that hissed across the yard. Together bent low, they crept toward the cellar. Clara's nightdress was drenched in seconds, plastered to her skin. A muzzle flash lit the yard. Someone fired a shot, and the bullet thudded into the ground near them. In the lightning's glare, Clara glimpsed a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, a rifle aimed their way. "Go." Silas shoved her forward, grimacing in pain. Another shot crackled, echoing in the storm. They scrambled to the cellar door, yanking it open. A bullet splintered the wooden frame above them. Rainwater cascaded into the hole as they tumbled inside, pulling the door shut. Their breaths came in ragged gasps. Over the roar of rain, they heard muffled shouts. "Find them! They're around, back!" Silas, shivering, pressed his ear to the door. "They'll figure out we're here soon." Clara's hands shook, panic beating against her ribs. She looked around the cellar's darkness. The only exit was the door above them. They were trapped. Outside, the storm raged, thunder rattling the earth. Inside the cramped cellar, they huddled in fear, listening to footsteps overhead. Clara prayed the night and the rain would somehow shield them, because if the men up there pried open that door, a bloodbath was certain. Footsteps scuffed overhead, punctuated by harsh curses as the bounty hunters spread around the property. Clara clutched Silas's arm, her heart in her throat. He clutched his revolver, the knuckles of his hand white. The cellar was cramped, piled with preserves and sacks of flour. In one corner, a stack of dusty crates offered a faint possibility of hiding further. but it wouldn't hold if men stormed inside. A flicker of lightning illuminated the cracks around the cellar door. Rain hammered relentlessly, creating a deafening roar. Above, one of the bounty hunters shouted, "They must have gone off into the woods." Another responded. "Keep looking." Clara exhaled shakily, sensing a brief moment of reprieve. She realized with some bitter irony that the storm might be their salvation. Too much darkness and rain to see clearly. They waited silent and tense for what felt like an eternity. Silas's breathing grew labored, his healing wounds protesting the frantic escape. Clara hovered close, pressing a hand to his side. Even in the gloom, she saw fresh blood on his bandages. "Your stitches tore," she whispered, horrified. He grimaced. "I'm fine. Just a scratch." But the sweat on his brow told another story. More minutes dragged by, each one heavy with dread. Eventually the footsteps above receded. Clara dared to hope the men had moved on, searching deeper into the woods, or heading back into town to regroup. Slowly, with trembling limbs, she pushed open the cellar door an inch. Rainwater gushed in. She peered out into the night, straining to see through the downpour. No sign of the intruders in the immediate yard. "We should stay put a bit longer," Silas murmured. Clara nodded. They huddled in the darkness, the storm providing cover as well as fearsome noise. The tension of their flight lingered. In the flickers of lightning, she could see Silas pale and sweating. "Let me see your wound," she said, rummaging for a lantern or a candle. She found an old lamp on a shelf, along with matches in a tin box. Carefully lighting it, she inspected his side. The bandage was soaked red, though not pouring blood. "I can't stitch this properly down here," she fretted. "We'd need proper light and supplies." He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Wait until we're sure they've gone." With the lamp casting long shadows on the earthen walls, Clara's eyes swept the cellar. She noticed a battered trunk against the far wall, half buried under sacks of grain. She'd never opened it before. It had come with the cottage when she moved in. Anything to distract herself from the fear, she inched over and tried the lid. It was locked. Silas, noticing, raised an eyebrow. "Locked trunk in your cellar you've never opened?" She shrugged. "I didn't know about the key." The previous occupant left some things behind. His curiosity piqued. Silas leaned forward. "Got a hairpin?" She nodded, pulling one from her damp hair. With deft hands, Silas manipulated the lock. After a moment, there was a soft click, and the trunk creaked open. Inside lay dusty documents, a couple of rusted tools, and a folded Confederate flag, an old relic. Clara inhaled sharply, unsettled by the remnants of a war that had taken so much from so many. "What is all this?" she muttered, rifling through aged letters addressed to a Samuel Whitfield, a name that made her blood run cold. Her father's name, though she knew he'd never lived here. How had these ended up in this cottage's cellar? Lightning flared again, revealing Silas's puzzled frown. Clara clutched an old photograph, a black and white portrait of a stern-faced man in a Confederate uniform. She recognized him from stories Colonel James Ludlow, a figure infamous in Kansas for brutal raids during the war. With shaking hands, Clara realized she was holding a piece of her family's past she'd never known. And it was hidden away here in Arbor's Edge, waiting to be discovered at the moment her life was tangled with another fugitive. She carefully replaced the items, her mind swirling with questions. The weight of buried secrets pressed upon her, echoing the storm raging above. Meanwhile, Silas gritted his teeth against the pain the flickering lantern light revealing that whether from old wars or new conflicts, blood was still being shed on this unforgiving land. At dawn, when the storm had finally ebbed into a cold drizzle, Clara and Silas ventured cautiously from the cellar. Water dripped from the eaves, and the yard was a muddy mire. There was no sign of the bounty hunters, but footprints and hoof prints trampled her small garden, indicating they'd searched thoroughly. Inside the cottage, furniture was overturned, drawers ransacked. The men must have forced entry after failing to find them outside. Clara's belongings lay scattered lesson plans, clothing a cherished locket from her mother. The sight made her stomach turn with anger and violation. "We can't stay here," Silas said, grimly scanning the damage. "They'll come back, and next time they might torch the place." Clara knelt to pick up the battered locket. "Where do we go?" He frowned. "I should leave on my own. You can claim I kidnapped you. Say you escaped or something. I'll draw them away." She stood, trembling with a mix of rage and resolve. "If they believe I helped you willingly, they'll destroy me. And if you're caught alone, you'll be killed on the spot." A shadow crossed his face. "I won't let that happen. We need a plan. Maybe I can prove my innocence for the shooting in Ellsworth, clear my name, or find a witness, someone to speak on my behalf." Clara thought of all the stories she'd heard about Western justice. Often a bullet replaced a trial. Still, they had few options. "Where can we find someone who'll vouch for you?" Silas hesitated. "There's an old friend, Jeremiah Tully, who works at the stable in Hayes City. He was there the night Jenkins drew on me. Jeremiah saw the whole thing and promised he'd testify if needed. If I can get to Hayes City and get his statement, maybe the sheriff there will see reason." "Hayes City is a long ride," Clara said, "and you're still hurt." He gave a weary nod. "I know. But it's that, or keep running forever." Clara grabbed a small valise and began packing essentials, clothes, a few heirlooms, some food from the pantry. "I can't stay. Even if I claim ignorance, Pinkertons might not believe me, or the sheriff might press charges. I'd lose my job, my home, everything." Silas reached for her hand, but pulled back uncertain. "Miss Whitfield, are you sure?" She swallowed hard. "It may not be safe, but staying here isn't safe either. If you think Jeremiah Tully can help clear your name, then that's the best chance to end this madness." He met her gaze, gratitude shining through the pain. "We leave tonight, under cover of darkness." They spent the rest of the day quietly repairing what they could, salvaging supplies. Clara wrote a note for the school's head trustee, Mr. Abbott, claiming an urgent family matter had called her away. She hated deceiving him, but there was no alternative. As dusk fell, they saddled 2 horses from the small stable behind her cottage. One was Clara's gentle mare, Daisy, and the other a mare Silas had found wandering after the storm, likely belonging to the bounty hunters. Silas managed to mount, though he grimaced with the strain. Leading the horses onto the road, they cast one last look at the battered cottage. Clara silently prayed they might return one day to a life of peace, but the reality was clear. They were fugitives now riding east in search of a fragile hope. They rode under the cloak of night, the muddy roads making travel slow and treacherous. Clara's heart pounded with each creak of saddle leather, expecting at any moment to hear the thunder of pursuit. Silas remained alert despite the pain in his side, one hand always near his revolver. Days stretched into a week as they skirted known towns, seeking back roads and lesser-known trails. They avoided large settlements for fear of wanted posters or Pinkerton agents. Each night they camped discreetly, lighting only small fires living off the dried meats and bread Clara had packed. On the second day, Silas almost collapsed from fever, his wound inflamed again. Clara insisted on stopping under a rocky outcrop to clean and redress it. Her medical supplies were meager, but her determination was strong. On the fourth day, they spotted riders on a ridge behind them. Panic seized Clara's chest, certain the bounty hunters or Pinkertons had found them. But the riders veered away, crossing the horizon. Silas said they might just be ranchers, but neither could relax. They passed through a tiny hamlet named Oakwood, miles away from Arbor's Edge. Clara used some of her small savings to buy fresh bandages and medicine from a local apothecary. She wore a bonnet low over her eyes, hoping to stay unnoticed while Silas remained out of sight in the woods. At times, Clara couldn't help but wonder if she'd made a grave mistake. She was uprooted from the life she'd carefully built, now labeled an accomplice to an outlaw. But then Silas would look at her with an earnestness in his eyes, or he'd quietly thank her for a bit of help with his bandages, and she remembered the sense of rightness that had guided her decisions. One evening, as they camped near a trickling creek, Clara couldn't sleep. She stared at the dancing flames of their small fire. Silas, leaning back on his saddlebag, watched the embers float skyward. "Why did you become a teacher?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. She twirled a twig in the dirt, hesitating. "I was raised in Georgia. My father died in the war. My mother moved us west for a new start. I saw so many children, orphaned, uneducated, falling into cycles of violence. I wanted to do something different, to give them hope." He nodded, absorbing her words. Then he said, "I wish I'd had a teacher like you when I was younger." She shot him a curious look. "Why is that?" He stared into the fire. "Maybe I wouldn't have ended up with a gun in my hand so often. My mother died when I was small. My father was a drunk. I drifted from one ranch job to another, then picked up a gun as a means to survive. Never really had someone to guide me." A flicker of compassion stirred within Clara. "It's not too late," she offered gently. "If we manage to clear your name, you can start over." Silas smiled sadly. "That's the hope I'm clinging to." They fell silent, listening to the creek's whisper. The next day's journey loomed, but for that moment, they found a fragile peace in the stillness of the frontier night, hoping that at the end of their perilous ride lay something resembling redemption. Under the sweltering midday sun, Silas and Clara cautiously entered Hayes City. Avoiding the bustling main street, they approached a quiet stable on the outskirts. Jeremiah Tully, older and worn, froze when Silas stepped from the shadows. "Silas Archer." Jeremiah gasped, dropping his brush. "Folks say you're a wanted man." Silas nodded gravely. "I'm here because you promised to testify. You saw Carl Jenkins attack first. You're my only hope." Jeremiah hesitated, eyes flickering nervously. "Jenkins' family holds power here. It won't be easy, Silas." Clara stepped forward urgently. "Please. Without you, Silas has no chance." Jeremiah sighed deeply, finally nodding. "All right. But know this, it's dangerous." They quickly made their way to Sheriff Eddington's office. Inside, a deputy reached for his gun, startled by Silas's sudden entrance. Jeremiah intervened. "We come in peace. Sheriff, hear us out." Sheriff Eddington listened skeptically as Jeremiah explained, recounting clearly how Jenkins had drawn first, leaving Silas no choice but self-defense. Still, the sheriff remained wary. Jenkins had powerful friends, he muttered. This could mean trouble. Before the sheriff could respond further, The door swung open abruptly. Detective Cooper Landry and 2 Pinkerton agents stepped inside, eyes sharp and guns at their sides. Sheriff Landry demanded coldly, "We have official authority. Silas Archer is ours." Clara's heart raced as the room grew tense. The sheriff raised a hand firmly. "This jurisdiction takes priority. Archer stays here until we hold a formal hearing." Detective Landry scowled darkly, but relented, stepping back in grudging compliance. Sheriff Eddington turned sternly to Silas and Clara. "You'll both be held overnight. You aided a fugitive, Miss Whitfield, so you'll have questions to answer as well." Clara felt dread rise inside her, but Silas touched her hand softly, reassuringly. "It's our only chance," he whispered gently. Soon iron bars separated them. Clara sat quietly, nerves frayed, hoping desperately that Jeremiah's testimony would clear Silas's name. In the cell beside hers, Silas sat in painful silence, fighting the lingering ache from his wounds. Outside, evening shadows lengthened over Hayes City, and whispers spread of tomorrow's trial. All they could do now was wait, praying truth would prevail, justice would be served, and their fragile hope might survive the harsh scrutiny of frontier justice. Morning sunlight streamed through the barred windows, illuminating the tense courtroom. Clara stood beside Silas, anxiety churning in her stomach, as Judge Franklin Price took his seat behind a wide wooden desk. The small room was crowded. Locals curious to witness frontier justice firsthand filled the benches, murmuring quietly. Jeremiah Tully spoke first, his voice steady despite nerves. "Your Honor, Carl Jenkins attacked Silas Archer without provocation. Archer drew his weapon purely in self-defense. I witnessed the entire incident clearly." Sheriff Eddington stepped forward, summarizing conflicting accounts. Reports from Ellsworth and Big Mike's saloon speak of further gunfire and deaths connected to Archer, he explained cautiously. Silas raised his chin, meeting the judge's probing gaze directly. "I regret the violence, but each time I acted to save my own life. I'm not proud of it, but I'm no murderer." Judge Price turned sharply to Clara. "Miss Whitfield, you knowingly sheltered this fugitive?" "Yes, Your Honor," she admitted firmly. "But I helped because I believed he deserved justice, not lynch mobs or bounty hunters." A sudden commotion drew all eyes as Detective Landry burst through the doors, flanked by armed Pinkertons. "We have authority to apprehend Silas Archer," Landry declared arrogantly. "He's wanted by higher powers." Judge Price's eyes narrowed sternly. "Detective Archer is facing local charges first. Until our proceedings conclude, your demands must wait." Landry clenched his jaw angrily, forced to silence. Turning back, Judge Price addressed the room. "I've heard sufficient testimony to believe Archer acted in self-defense regarding Jenkins. However, accusations from Big Mike's saloon must be accounted for." Silas held his breath as the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Archer, until a full investigation concludes, you'll remain in custody here. Rest assured you'll have a fair chance to prove your innocence. Miss Whitfield, you acted illegally but under compelling circumstances. No charges will be pressed against you today, but tread carefully." Clara's relief was immense, though uncertainty lingered. Sheriff Eddington approached, taking Silas's weapons gently but firmly. "Come quietly now," he murmured. As they were led away separately, Silas met Clara's gaze. He nodded reassuringly, silently promising that somehow they'd endure. Outside, storm clouds gathered, mirroring their uncertain future, but they clung desperately to the fragile hope justice might prevail. The crowded courtroom fell silent as Judge Price removed his glasses and sighed deeply. His gaze swept slowly over Silas, Clara, and Jeremiah before finally speaking. "After careful consideration," he began, "Jeremiah Tully's eyewitness testimony supports Silas Archer's claim of self-defense regarding Carl Jenkins. The evidence from Big Mike's saloon also suggests Archer acted only when threatened. Therefore, the charges of murder are dismissed." Silas exhaled heavily, relief washing visibly over his face. "However," the judge continued sternly, "the harm you've caused can't be overlooked. You're ordered to pay restitution to the victims' families. Until your debt is settled, you'll remain under local supervision. Any attempt to flee will result in immediate arrest." Detective Landry, standing impatiently at the back, stepped forward angrily. "Your Honor, the Pinkerton Agency demands custody of Archer immediately. We have orders from higher authorities." Judge Price met Landry's stare firmly. "In this jurisdiction, the local law takes precedence. Archer remains here until restitution is complete. Your authority must wait." Landry scowled, but outmatched by the judge's firm stance, stormed from the courtroom with his men close behind. Outside, Clara felt tears of relief blur her vision. Silas gently took her hand. "Thank you for believing in me," he whispered. Jeremiah patted Silas warmly on the shoulder. "I'm glad justice prevailed, friend." Judge Price approached Clara solemnly. "Miss Whitfield, your actions broke the law. But given the circumstances and your intentions, the court issues only a formal admonishment. Consider this your warning." Clara nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "I understand, Your Honor. Thank you." Sheriff Eddington watched them carefully. "I'll be keeping an eye on you, Archer. Don't disappoint us." Silas faced him squarely. "I won't, Sheriff." They walked out into the bright afternoon. The weight of accusation finally lifted. Though their future remained uncertain, Silas and Clara now had a genuine chance at redemption, a chance they'd earned through honesty and courage. Together, beneath the clear Kansas sky, they silently promised to make this second chance count. Weeks stretched into months in Hayes City, where Silas fulfilled his obligations, steadily working to pay restitution. Clara found temporary employment teaching at a local church school, her passion and dedication earning admiration. Meanwhile, Silas quietly labored at a nearby ranch, proving his sincerity and trustworthiness to the townsfolk who had initially viewed him with suspicion. Every evening, Clara and Silas shared meals at the modest boarding house. In these quiet moments, their bond deepened, a connection born of shared danger and trust. But even as they carved out some stability, the shadow of Detective Landry and the Pinkertons loomed nearby, quietly watching and waiting for any misstep. One clear evening, as stars scattered brightly across the prairie sky, Silas walked beside Clara at the edge of town. He paused, gazing westward. "There's new land opening up in Colorado," he said thoughtfully. "Might be a good chance to start fresh, without looking over our shoulders." Clara hesitated, her heart heavy with memories of Arbor's Edge and the students she had left behind. But deep inside, she knew returning wasn't an option, not with suspicion clouding her reputation. She took a deep breath, courage steadying her voice. "Then I'll go with you. Teachers are always needed out west, and perhaps it's time I taught lessons of hope somewhere new." Silas reached for her hand gently, gratitude and relief shining in his eyes. "I promise, Clara, I'll be a better man, not just for myself, but for you." With first light, they loaded their few belongings onto 2 sturdy horses. Riding side by side, they headed west away from past troubles and toward the endless possibilities of the frontier. Months later, in a quiet Colorado settlement, a small schoolhouse stood firm against the vast plains. Inside, Clara Archer taught eager children with quiet strength and compassion. Silas worked diligently on a nearby ranch, respected for his honesty and hard work. His guns, once instruments of survival, were now safely locked away untouched. Together they built a humble, meaningful life, free from their troubled past. Each evening, beneath the broad western sky, Clara and Silas spoke of dreams, an orchard, a family, a peaceful future. Their story became more than just survival. It became a testament to redemption, hope, and the boundless possibilities of second chances on the frontier. Months later, across the Colorado plains, a modest schoolhouse stands tall on the edge of a small settlement. Inside, Clara Whitfield, now Clara Archer, teaches a new generation of frontier children, her voice calm and confident. She carries no trace of the turmoil she once endured, except perhaps the quiet strength in her gaze. Silas Archer works at a nearby ranch known for his steady hands and honest labor. Though rumors of his past occasionally surface, his hard work and humility earn him growing respect. The gunslinger is gone. In his place is a man rebuilding a life with his own hands. In the evenings, Clara and Silas sit beneath the stars, planning a future that once felt impossible. A small plot of land, an orchard, an expanded schoolroom. Their dreams are modest but deeply shared. They rarely speak of the bounty hunters, the trial, or the stormy nights spent hiding in fear. Those memories fade like dust on the prairie wind. What remains is the bond they forged through risk, sacrifice, and belief in one another. Their journey from fugitives to neighbors, from outcasts to builders, is not one of easy triumph, but of quiet redemption. Together they've proven that even on the roughest trails there's room for second chances, and that sometimes the West's harshest lands can still offer the sweetest new beginnings. Thank you for journeying with us through this Wild West drama of courage, compassion, and the power of second chances. Clara Whitfield and Silas Archer remind us that sometimes the toughest decisions made in the darkest nights can lead to the brightest dawns. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat, caught up in the dust and danger of frontier life, we invite you to help us share this tale with others. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more gripping stories, each crafted to transport you to another time and place. Together, let's keep the spirit of storytelling alive, fueling our imaginations and kindling hope that even when the odds seem stacked against us, the human heart can overcome and find redemption in the unlikeliest of places. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure.